All right, today we're going to explore a really distinct, kind of provocative philosophy on health and disease. It's all drawn directly from our source materials, and it challenges, well, a lot of conventional thinking by proposing a radically different origin for so many common illnesses. Okay, let's dive into this. This whole philosophy, it really boils down to this one powerful question. Instead of seeing dozens of different diseases, each with their own separate cause, it asks us to just think for a second. What if a lot of our ailments are just different symptoms of the same core problem?
In this quote, it just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the central idea. It really frames the debate as a choice. Do we spend all our time managing the smoke, or do we finally go and find the fire and put it out? This explainer is going to walk you through exactly what this philosophy says that fire is.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with a core analogy. Then we'll get into the two main culprits it points to, these hidden invaders and pollutants. After that, we'll look at the cures they propose, and we'll finish up with the pretty amazing results this approach claims to achieve.
Okay, so let's start with a fundamental principle, and honestly, it's best explained through a simple but really effective analogy.
Now, this is such a powerful way to illustrate the two perspectives. The source asks you to imagine this. A dog is barking its head off because you're standing on its tail. So what do? Do you give the dog Prozac? Do you perform surgery to stop the barking? No way, of course not. You just get off its tail. The argument here is that modern medicine, way too often, focuses on silencing that bark.
So here's the crucial takeaway. Things we think of as the actual disease, from weight gain to chronic pain, they aren't seen as the real problem here. They're just the effects. They're the body's way of barking, of screaming for help. And the real goal is to figure out why it's screaming in the first place.
So, if our symptoms are just the body barking, what are we stepping on? Well, this philosophy points to two main causes. And the first one, it might surprise you. It's what the sources call hidden invaders. Now, you gotta understand the word parasite is used super broadly here. It's not just the big, creepy, crawly things you might be thinking of. It's an umbrella term for pretty much any organism living in or on us and taking nourishment from us. We're talking everything from large intestinal flukes all the way down to microscopic bacteria and viruses. And this is where the claims get really specific. The source book, The Cure for All Diseases, makes these direct connections. For instance, it claims that in every single case of cancer, you'll find the human intestinal fluke living in the liver. In the same way, the pancreatic fluke is linked to diabetes and the roundworm Ascaris to asthma. But wait, how do these things end up in our liver or brain? Well, the theory goes that when our body's defenses are down, these invaders can break out of their normal life cycles. They migrate to organs where they just don't belong, and that's when they start causing all this disruption. Which conveniently brings us to the second root cause.
Right, this is where the story gets even more interesting. Because according to this philosophy, the parasites aren't acting alone. Nope, they're actually being helped by a constant onslaught of modern pollutants.
So the key thing to get here is how these two things work together. The pollutants, they're like the accomplice in a crime. They allegedly weaken our immune system, and that creates this perfect environment where these parasites can not only survive, but actually thrive in places they should never be.
And the sources are very clear about which pollutants they're most worried about. We're talking about industrial solvents like propyl alcohol and benzene that you might find in common household products, heavy metals like mercury from dental fillings, and even toxins like formaldehyde in foam mattresses.
And just look at how direct these connections are claimed to be. Propyl alcohol, a common solvent, is said to pollute the liver, which then creates the perfect breeding ground for that intestinal fluke, the one they link to cancer. And benzene, another solvent, is said to go right to the thymus gland, which cripples the immune system and, according to the book, causes AIDS.
Okay, so if those are the problems, parasites and pollutants, what on earth are the solutions? Well, this next section dives into what they call the arsenal of cures, all designed to get rid of both. One of the big protocols they talk about in the broadcast is this morning parasitic smoothie. It's a whole process. You start by prepping your gut, and then you bring in this special smoothie. And it's even customized. If they suspect H. pylori bacteria, you add things like raw turmeric. If it's a mold issue, you might switch to a keto diet.
The book lays out a bunch of other protocols too. There's a big herbal program that's supposed to kill over 100 different types of parasites. And then you have these specific cleanses, one for the kidneys, one for the liver, one for the bowels, each one designed to flush out toxins and all that built-up gunk.
But maybe the most unique, kind of out there tool in this whole arsenal is something called the Zapper. It's a simple little electronic device, basically a frequency generator powered by a 9-volt battery with some copper pipes. And the claim is that its specific electrical frequency can literally kill parasites, bacteria, and viruses all through your body without harming a single one of your own cells.
And what's just wild is that this isn't some secret, expensive device you have to buy. It's totally DIY. The sourcebook doesn't just describe it, it literally gives you the full schematic, the parts list, everything you need to build your own at home from stuff you could get at any electronics shop. So, you've got these unique diagnoses and these pretty intense treatments. What are the results? What do they claim happens? This last section looks at the outcomes that this philosophy promises.
You hear some really powerful personal stories. The speaker in one source, for example, talks about suffering from horrible restless legs for over a year. He says they identified his root cause as an H. pylori infection, and once he started the protocol for that, within 2 weeks, his restless legs were gone. And he says they never came back.
And then there's this case study, a professional musician who was supposedly bedridden for years. After just 6 weeks of finding and addressing his root cause, the story goes that the guy got a new lease on life. He was up, he was out, he was performing again. These are the kinds of dramatic turnarounds they claim are possible.
So you hear stories like that and you have to ask, right? How are they even figuring this stuff out in the first place? Well, they're not relying on conventional diagnostic tests. Instead, the sources describe methods like sclerology, which is analyzing the red lines in the whites of your eyes to find stress in your organs, and also traditional tongue diagnosis, looking at the cracks, the color, the coating for similar clues.
And really, that all brings us to our final question. This philosophy, it presents a world where these incredibly complex diseases have, supposedly, very simple and identifiable causes: parasites and pollution. It challenges us to think, is the path to being well really about targeting these root causes? Or is the reality of our health just way more intricate than that? It kind of leaves you wondering, is the answer a lot simpler or a whole lot more complex than we imagine?